Welcome back. In this video, I'm just going to walk through some of the common types of assertions we get with unit test. We've already seen assert equal, but there's also assert not equal. So sometimes you want to make sure that a value is not returned. Like any value is okay except for this one. So you can use assert not equal. We also have assert true and assert false. If we wanted to take a look, let's define a new function and just have it be empty. Let's call it, what should we call it? Let's go with def is funny. And then it takes in a person's name. And let's just have it pass. All right, so we can go over to our test file and just define a test. Def test, let's go with is funny, and we'll pass in Tim, for example. And let's say Tim is not supposed to be funny. So I would do self.assert, and I could do self.assert equal, and then I'd need to import it first, is funny. And I could do self.assert equal is funny when I pass in Tim, like this, should be false. Or I can do self.assert false is funny Tim, like that. So this is checking that these two things are equal. This is checking that this is false, which is the same thing. So I'll comment the top one out. We'll just do self.assert false is funny. The other thing I didn't show in the last video, we can include an optional message here, like Tim should not be funny. Okay, and I'll fast forward and add another test. Okay, I added in test is funny, anyone else? And I put 3 assertions in here, and that's okay because they're all kind of testing the same thing. I want to test that when I call is funny with Blue or Tammy or Sven, all of them should be true. So I used assert true rather than assert false. So it's not that you can't have more than one assertion in any test function. It's just that you want to make sure they are testing similar things. And these are different, right? I'm singling Tim out. Sorry, Tim. So you get your own test function. If I run it now, we get 1 failure only. And actually, the reason that's happening, this is important, is that instead of getting 2 failures, you can see that none is not true. So the blue line is failing here. But this actually worked because assert false is actually assert falsy. So it's going to check if what was returned, nothing right now, so it's none. So at the end of the day, it's doing is none falsy, and that's true. So actually, it might have been better to go with this one, to double check that Tim is absolutely false. None is different. So if I try it now, we get 2 failures. Okay, but now let's go implement our code. So up here, we'll just do, let's say, if person equals Tim, I'll just do is Tim, return false, else we'll just return true. And we don't need an else. Now if we run our tests, there we go. Everything's working. One thing I didn't point out, when Blue was failing here, you see we get this message, none is not true, Blue should be funny. So that was what I had added after, where is that? Here we go. So we could add a message up here with our doc string, something like, am I missing a quote? There we go. Anyone else but Tim should be funny. And that's like the goal for this entire test function. This is for each individual assertion, so we can see where it's failing. So if I uncomment this return true, we can see exactly what we get. So it tells us anyone else but Tim should be funny. So that's the test function where things went wrong. And the assertion itself was Blue should be funny. Okay, I'll uncomment that. Other types of assertions, there is assert is none and assert is not none. So if you want to make sure the value you get back is not none, I've used that one quite often. There's also assert in and assert not in, so that we could use that to test if a value is in a range of values or in a list of values. And there's also more. You can look in the documentation to see those. But these are some of the more commonly used ones. Let's say I have a function called laugh, and laugh just returns a laughing noise, like haha, lol, tee hee hee. Okay, so I could write tests for that, but the problem is it's going to randomly pick something and return it to me. And testing for randomness is hard. But in our case, there's only a couple options. So we could write def test laugh, and we'll just write a self.assert in. And we'll just call laugh, which I'll need to import up top. And the value in laugh should be in a tuple of LOL, haha, and teehee. Let's go with teehee. Okay, so this is just going to check if the result of laugh is in this tuple, rather than checking if it's exactly LOL or exactly haha. So every time I run the tests, we might get something different from laugh, so we could use this instead. And I'll need to import laugh up here. And if I run it right now, we get a failure. None, not found in that values, or it's not found in that tuple of values. Okay, so then we just go over here, and we'll need to import random. So let's do from random import choice, and then we'll just return choice of that tuple, and it works. Okay, so that's just showing you another assertion. I'm not going to go through all of them. They're pretty self-explanatory. One thing I will single out, however, is testing for errors. So we can use self.assert raises to make sure that we get an error in a certain situation. And not only that, but we can also guarantee the type of that error. So here's an example. Self.assert raises, and then we pass in index error, and then a slightly different syntax, colon, and then the code that we want that should generate an index error. In this case, L equals the list 1, 2, 3, accessing L bracket 100 should give us an index error. So back to our tests, let's say that I want to write a test to make sure that our eat function, when you pass in is healthy, if is healthy is not a Boolean, then we want a value error to be raised. So we can define another test. So def test eat, and let's go with eat healthy Boolean. We just add our with statement. So with self.assert raises, and the type of assertion, or the type of exception we want is a value error. Okay, so it should raise that. And when should that happen? If we ran eat with, it doesn't matter, the first argument, pizza, but then I set is healthy to a string like who cares. This should give us a value error. So that's how we write that test. And let's just add our little documentation up here that just says, let's say, is healthy must be a Boolean. Let's just go with bool. Right now, if I run it, we get a failure. Value error was not raised. So it tells us I was expecting that, and it didn't happen. So let's now implement that. Over here in eat, we're just going to add a check. If is healthy is not an instance of Boolean, then we'll raise value error. So down here, let's just do that at the very beginning, actually. So if is healthy, and how do we check if it's an instance? We do is instance is healthy, comma bool, but we want to check if it's not. So if this is false. If that's the case, we will raise a value error. And let's have a message that just says is healthy must be a Boolean. And now if we run our tests, it passes. And you can see all of these messages. I'm using the verbose. We take them off. Everything passes. It's pretty cool. So that is unit tests in a nutshell. Next, I'm going to show you some nice features that unit test comes with that allows us to add code before and after our tests so we can reduce duplication. This is the base recipe for testing with unit test. Define your class. It must inherit from unit test.testCase. At the end, you call unit test.main. And then in here, you define your test functions. Each test case has at least one assertion inside of it, and there's a bunch of these assert helpers. Alrighty,